incident was about to take place that would shake the foundations of the civilized world.
It is time to open your mind. Time to discover your divine self as we navigate this holographic matrix together. Strap in, Cosmic Family, as we slide through this wormhole of cosmic information together in search of the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
It's time to go inside the matrix. With your host, Jimmy Brent.
All right, welcome everybody to Inside the Matrix. We're so happy that you're here today with us. And if you're not with us live, we're happy that you're listening in the archive and whenever that may be and wherever you may be. As always, before we start the show, I want to thank those of you who have contributed to the show and help keep it on the air, and especially our good friend Florida Chick. You are amazing, and we really appreciate you, and your support has really been stellar in helping keep this show alive. So we totally appreciate that and wanted to recognize you. And today, our special guest is Dr. Adriane Hines. And Dr. Hines graduated from the University of Florida, receiving a bachelor's degree in science with a focus in biology and a minor focus in chemistry. During her undergraduate studies, she worked in a food allergy research at the University of Florida Department of Food Science and Human Nutrition. Upon graduation, she dedicated herself to a full-time research position studying diabetes type 2 at the University of Florida College of Medicine in the Department of Endocrinology. Research helped to satisfy her inner desire to know the why behind diseases. But she still had a driving desire to help people. She found the answer to this desire in functional medicine. She graduated from the Palmer College of Chiropractic with a doctorate of chiropractic medicine. While a student at Palmer, she received awards for her contribution in the areas of radiology, clinical practices, and campus leadership. It was during her studies at Palmer that she was introduced to functional medicine, an area of expertise in the interpretation of blood chemistry and administration of nutraceuticals to combat early disease processes, reverse existing diseases, and promote optimal internal body environment. To further her understanding in the area of functional medicine, she had attended outside training in the areas of internal disorders and nutrition. She has completed the required 300 hours for both internal disorders and nutrition diplomates. In May 2018, she was awarded the diplomate in internal disorders and will sit for her nutrition board exam. She is devoted to providing the most up-to-date research and techniques for her patients. In alignment with these efforts, she is currently working on her fellowship in anti-aging medicine and function medicine with the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. She is currently board certified in anti-aging and functional medicine. Wow, Dr. Hines, welcome to the show. That's quite a resume there.
Wow, thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's wonderful to meet people that are really, number one, interested in helping their patients as first and foremost on their list. We see too many health practitioners these days that are kind of in it for the country club life, should we say, and not so much for the other. But you're obviously dedicated to your patients and to your art of healing, and we really appreciate that totally. So I always ask our new guests on the show if you could kind of take us through your background a bit. Where were you born? How were you raised? What was your family like? And, you don't have to go into big detail about it, but just kind of give us a feel for where you came from and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. So I'm kind of a little farm girl. I'm originally from Oklahoma. I grew up on our small little family farm, so we grew lots of veggies and fruits, and so I was in the dirt all the time. I actually kind of contribute that to why my immune system is as amazing as it is. I tell my patients all the time, I think it's because I grew up eating dirt, because seriously, I would grow yeah, go outside and pick, berries off the bush and strawberries out of the ground and eat raw potatoes and, have microbes and dirts all over them. And that was just my normal. So I had an amazing, looking back on it, amazing childhood of, kind of growing up in that environment. And so I naturally had just a curiosity about the world. My favorite word is why. You can ask my dad. It drove him crazy because anytime he would tell me this is the way things are, I would always ask why. And a parent, doesn't want to be questioned about their authority on things. But I just, kind of kept pursuing things. And it was just my natural curiosity. So my favorite word is still why. Which is great because that really kind of pushes me toward learning more things and helping my patients because I'm constantly asking, why is this happening? And that's kind of why I got started in functional medicine in the first place. My kid, who is now 14, when he was a baby, about 2 weeks after he was born, I had no complications during pregnancy. I had a great birth. And at 2 weeks old, my kid had a rash over 80% of his body. And so I'm taking him to the pediatrician, like, what's going on with my perfect little kid? Like, why is this happening? And the answer I got was, we're not quite sure, but here's some cream. So I said, okay. Meanwhile, my kid he was born in September. I have pictures of him in his Thanksgiving onesie, which is in November, and he looks like a basted turkey because he has just this ointment all over his body. And so I kept pushing the pediatrician and pushing them as to like, why is this happening? Why is this not getting fixed? And finally, he either got tired of me being persistent or saw the light. I don't know which one it was. Either way, we did some blood testing and found out my son was highly allergic to peanuts. And he was allergic to multiple other things at the time. And so the answer the pediatrician gave me was, okay, you have to stop breastfeeding him and he needs to go on hypoallergenic formula. And I said, well, why? Again, why? I said, why?
Not like you're a peanut, right?
Right. I said, well, I don't understand why. I said, I thought breast milk was the best thing for babies. And mind you, this is before I started school. So I really knew nothing outside of my, high school education and some small community college courses. So I didn't have the education that I have now. But deep down, my intuition was like, this isn't right. I don't understand this. I've been told breast milk is the best thing for babies, and you're telling me I can't feed my kid. And so he said, well, the proteins are getting into your breast milk, and that's the reason why he's having this reaction. So unless you want to take all of these things out of your diet, which is going to be really hard, he's going to have to go on formula. And I was like, yeah, challenge accepted. I can take all that stuff out of my diet if that's what's best for him. So he never really could give me an answer. And so me being the mama bear that I am, I said, well, you know what? I'm going to go to school and I'm going to find the answers myself. So that's where I kind of set on my path to really find the answers to what was wrong with my kiddo and why this happened. And it's been really amazing because I really owe a lot to him. And unfortunately, the situation that it was, but I'm so grateful that I kind of went through that because it really has put me in a position to help so many people. And I don't think he really understands the true impact that he has on other people's lives through me. So I just think that that's pretty cool. But that's where, my passion came from. It started from that mama bear. And I'm sure plenty of mamas out there in the audience and dads too can understand, we would do anything for our kids and really fight for them. So that's where it kind of all started.
Wow, that's great. Now, did you ever get to the bottom of it? Did you figure it out?
So a little complicated. When it comes to food allergies, especially in infants, super, super young babies. I mean, he was 2 weeks old when we found this out. So I'm finding out as I'm, going through a lot of my research in my practice that, one, I didn't realize that there was peanut oil that's put in some vaccines. So that could potentially have been problematic in a young kid. So I'm not 100% if that's the case. They will tell you that food allergies are normally kind of an inherited thing. It's just programming from the immune system. But I'm going to tell you that nobody on either side had any food-related allergies, even extended family. So the fact that it's not, I don't really think it's coming from a genetic component that was kind of passed on, but the medical side of things would tell you, oh, it's probably genetic. But it just doesn't really kind of pan out in my opinion. So I'm not 100% sure because I didn't know a whole lot about vaccines like I do now. And he was vaccinated. I stopped vaccinating him just because for some reason my intuition was like, I don't really know that this is the right thing for him. And I started looking at how much he was going to have compared to what I had when I was a kid, and it didn't really add up to me. So I don't really have the answers as far as why. And who knows, maybe it was a, predestined thing that this was my catalyst to put me on this, kind of road to help other people. And I don't really know. So I kind of look at it in multiple different ways. Like maybe this was part of destiny's kind of design. But of course, obviously there was external sources. I can't really fully say it was vaccine related, but I kind of have, a hunch that it potentially would have been something like that.
Yeah. And, I've talked to many different doctors on the show, both on air and off air. And this seems to be a fairly common thing in discussing, vaccines with a lot of these doctors, is that allergies is definitely something that occurs that they've noticed as a result of vaccines. So vaccines are a pretty, hideous thing. We can kind of get into that. But I wanted to ask you about functional medicine. What is that about, and how did you, kind of get into that?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so functional medicine, it really is a body system and integrative focused approach to the whole body itself.
A holistic approach.
A holistic approach. You got it. Because we know that the GI tract does not just function by itself. We know the thyroid does not just function by itself. We know that, things that are happening in the GI, that we can send signals from the vagus nerve up to the brain, and we can have problems with, mood and with cognitive function because we have GI imbalance. We know that if the adrenals are off, they're going to throw off the thyroid. So for a patient to go see, a GI doc. A GI doc is amazing because they know the GI inside and out. But unfortunately, they don't know how the GI connects to the brain, and they don't know how the GI connects to the immune system potentially. And that's when you get it wrong. When you focus on the system isolated instead of how the system operates in the whole system of the body, you're going to miss things. And so functional medicine really fills in those gaps where if I'm, talking about something with the GI, I'm going to know I need to look at the immune system as well. I need to look at cognitive function as well. I need to look at hormones and, cholesterol and cardiovascular disease, because there's a lot of different things that are kind of happening in response to the GI tract and how things are working. So that's where functional medicine sets itself apart from other areas of medicine, in that it really fills in the gaps and looks at the patient as a whole. It's very holistic. And one of the things that I really appreciated and loved about functional medicine is the reference ranges that we use are more refined. So if I do your blood chemistry and through Quest and LabCorp, you're going to have your ranges, and then you're going to have reference ranges. Well, those reference ranges are based off of the average population, and the average population isn't healthy. We're seeing that, time and time again. And why would you want to compare yourself to an unhealthy population, right? So the reference ranges that we use in functional medicine are more refined because we're able to see, what does the literature and the research say happens when the levels are too low or when the levels are too high. So we're able to pick up on things when they're in their infancy. So it's more of early detection when we're keeping it in a nice refined range. So that's what kind of sets things apart and kind of explains functional medicine. I mean, I still spend a lot of time with my patients, but patients are in awe every day that when I tell them to prepare for their first visit, because they really kind of think, oh, I'm going to, be there for maybe a 30-minute office visit. And I tell them it's an hour and a half. Like I need an hour and a half. And you say, oh, wow. And that's exactly the response I get from patients is, really? You're going to spend that much time with me? And my answer is, yes, you deserve that much time, because for me to spend, 30 minutes, and honestly, to see your traditional doctor, you're lucky if you get 7 to 15. Right.
It's a factory system, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And it's unfortunate because it's really pushed through by the insurance companies, and the insurance dictating what they will pay for and how much time you can spend. And so it's kind of a big mess. But yeah, I spend an hour and a half with my patients the first time, because I need to be able to ask a lot of questions. I need to really get to the root of what the problem is. And I can't get to the root of the problem in 15 minutes. It just is not possible, especially for a lot of my complex cases. I mean, I have patients that are on the spectrum. I have, patients with diverticulitis and have had multiple surgeries. So, I just can't spend a limited time with them. I really need to do, as a doctor, we have to, get in there and do the work. And that's why I budget that much time.
I love that. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Well, and that's what patients, it's funny to hear them because they're in awe when I say that. And I normally get patients that are, kind of call and they're like, you're really my last resort, because I've tried everything else. And so it's amazing to see these patients kind of turn around with taking a new, holistic approach to things, how they can feel so much better. And so I'm kind of the last resort person, and I'm okay with that, because then we can hit a home run, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've noticed, it's sad really what's happened to, our healthcare system in this country, mainly with allopathic medicine, because the schools do not teach these doctors all that they need to know. And your point is so well taken. If you don't consider the body in a holistic approach as a series of all kinds of different systems that work together, electromagnetic systems, energy meridians, you've got the biochemical reactions, you've got the glands and all these different, the brain, the heart, all the organs, everything works together and synergistically, or at least it's supposed to. But allopathic doctors tend to treat things more on a chemical level. Well, this is an imbalance, so we give you this to throw that back into balance. But then as soon as they give you that, they're creating 3 other imbalances somewhere else, and it becomes a very complicated mess of side effects and synthetic petrochemical drugs, that they have. It's just a real shame because people are typically programmed into believing that these doctors are like gods, and they, just whatever they say is the end all be all. But that's just not the case. And then, people like yourself who have taken the time to study and to get into the root effects of disease and all the things that can happen to us are so needed today. And people need to really appreciate that that's what's going on, and understand that our healthcare system was hijacked quite a while ago.
That's interesting you say that, because I really had no idea. I mean, I'm an 80s baby, so I only know like what I know, right? But I was reading something recently that was talking about how homeopathic medicine and naturopathic medicine, those actually used to be taught in medical schools. And that was part of being a physician, is you learned about these normal like remedies and you were able to utilize them. And then Big Pharma came along and that changed. And I was appalled. Like I'm on the lookout for, early 1900s like textbooks so that I can learn stuff from back then, because I feel like that's going to be more relevant now than any of the pharmaceutical things that we have now that we're spending so much money on research
Absolutely.
to develop, because they were working. So I don't understand if it's not broke, don't fix it. I mean, but I guess things change and things are money driven. But unfortunately for these doctors, they're really kind of trained what they're trained in medical school, and a lot of them don't seek outside training. And if they don't, then they're kind of stuck in that sleepy, big pharma coma. And hopefully some of them, kind of wake up. And I've seen plenty that will, jump on the functional medicine bandwagon. And unfortunately, what happens is ask any functional medicine practitioner, and they really start on their path because they either have a loved one who gets sick or they have an experience themselves. So.
Mm-hmm. And, that experience, as you mentioned before, even with your son, those kinds of experiences are really the best teacher because it grabs your attention. It's vitally important to you. So you're going to spend a lot of time in getting to the answers. And I'm really not trying to bash all medical doctors because there are a lot of great doctors out there. And there are some medical doctors who do incorporate, the type of practice that you have, which is great. And for trauma care, you can't beat a medical doctor. I mean, if you get
Absolutely.
shot or
Absolutely.
something really severe like that, a medical doctor is going to be your guy or gal. It's going to save your life. But in other areas, and it's not, again, they're not all a bunch of greedy people. There's a lot of good intentioned people out there that just don't have the training and the understanding that you have to get to the root of the matter and really understand what's happening in the human body. And back in the 30s, really, the Rockefellers, basically the oil people, decided that they wanted to expand their empire into the health world, and they basically started funding all of the medical schools. And they also started putting out propaganda, which went against all the natural remedies. And, today it's called alternative medicine, but actually the, big pharma medicine should be called alternative medicine because the natural methods have always been here forever, for thousands and thousands of years and have worked rather well. But we, just like in politics and other areas, we get psychopaths who are hell-bent on control, money, power, all those, all the traps of the human existence. And they make things happen and that are many times to our detriment. But thank God for people like you.
Oh, man, so true. And unfortunately, money, it really is the driving force behind a lot of this. But you are right, like, I wouldn't want to be in any other country if I needed to have any kind of surgery or any specialty work, because we really do have the top physicians here for that. So that is one thing that hands down they definitely have. And I'm really hoping that more of the primary care physicians can get back to what used to be, your family doctor that would come to your house and take care of your family and deliver your babies and knew everybody. That's really what I'm striving for.
And, ultimately, I have said this so many times, I would love to see in any hospital setting just a wide spectrum of doctors and the type of work that they do, from everything from chiropractors to acupuncturists to medical doctors to, all different types of practitioners. And then when the patient comes in, they can decide, how can we best help this person? Rather than, one size fits all, basically, in most of the hospitals these days. Anyway, time always flies by, and we're coming up on our first break, Dr. Hines. So we're going to take a short pause right here, and we'll be right back. So anybody out there, if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat, and we'll be glad to interact with you on that. You're listening to Inside the Matrix with our special guest, Dr. Adriane Hines. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody, to Inside the Matrix with our special guest, Dr. Adriane Hines. Dr. Hines, let's talk about some of the therapies that you utilize in your practice. Give us an idea of the range of therapies that you might use, depending on the situation.
Absolutely. So we've already kind of touched on functional medicine. One of the cool things I'll tell you is I've been utilizing telemedicine for my functional medicine patients for the last 3 years. So I know that that's kind of a new concept for a lot of people with COVID. A lot of practitioners were going to telemedicine, but I've been utilizing it for 3 years. I have patients all over the country. So that's one of the cool, kind of therapeutics, I guess, or interesting things in the office is the utilization of, telemedicine with my functional medicine patients. But as far as in-office stuff, I really am a nerd. Obviously, you can look at my bio, and I'm constantly trying to learn new things and, be a little bit of a nerd. And I probably was some kind of inventor or some sort of scientist in a previous lifetime because I'm just such a nerd. So as far as tech in the office, I utilize my cold laser so much. And I'll give you some examples of how I utilize it. But first, I'll kind of explain to you what it is, because most people have no idea what cold laser is. You hear cold laser and you expect it's going to be cold, but it's not. The difference between a cold laser and a hot laser is a hot laser is used in surgery. So this one will actually be able to cut and penetrate the skin, right? So those are considered hot surgical lasers. A cold laser is a step down from that, meaning that it can get warm, but it doesn't actually cut the skin. So it's safe to use in clinical practice, right? So I use a class 4 cold laser. It uses red and near infrared light, and the frequencies range from 660 hertz to 920, I believe. And so within these frequencies, it's going to have, 20 watts of power, so it actually can penetrate very deeply. The cool thing about red light is not easily absorbed by the outer skin layers, so it can actually penetrate deeper. And so red light is going to stimulate our circulation, so it actually stimulates the vessels to cause more vasodilation, which means they open up. It also is going to increase the circulation, so we're going to have more oxygen flow, more blood flow to the area. It's going to saturate the area in oxygen, because it actually stimulates hemoglobin to drop off more oxygen. And then that oxygen can go into our electron transport chain, which is the powerhouse of our cell. That's where we get our ATP from, our energy. And so it can just help with mitochondrial function, right? So the way that I use this in the office, it's originally, kind of classified or marketed for deep heating for muscles and joints, but understanding the physics behind it and, that nerdy side of me, I was able to kind of utilize this in a couple of different ways. So one of the things that I do in the office is my patients who have problems with menstrual dysfunction. So I have a pediatric female dominant practice. Obviously, I have a family practice, so I can handle anything. But that's kind of where a lot of my patients are. And so I have plenty of women coming in with, female disorders or menstrual dysfunction. And we are able to utilize the cold laser over the abdomen, meaning that, it's not invasive. I'm just taking this nice little wand and we're, rubbing the wand over the abdomen area, and it gets a little warm. It feels like a warm bath. It's very soothing. That actually helps with the organ function itself. I've had patients that will, their menstrual cycles will regulate. I actually had one patient who had HPV, and she had this for many years. It actually cleared it. And her gynecologist was floored. She called me and was like, "What did you do?" So that was pretty amazing, because we weren't even intending to do that. We were just utilizing it for her GI and for her female organs. And I said, let's make sure we get in here and really get some red light therapy in this area. And she reported back that we cleared her HPV, which is a happy, awesome thing. And apparently one of the frequencies of the light, it was a resonant frequency for her virus, and it cleared it out, and that's great. So we utilize that. I utilize it for my babies in the office or kids that have ear infections. We can utilize the cold laser over the outside of the ear, around the base of the skull, and those areas that'll get into the actual ear canal. And, a lot of our bacteria that become overgrown in our bodies, whether it's the GI tract or the ear, they're actually very anaerobic, which means that they don't like oxygen. So when you saturate them with oxygen, they can't survive. So utilizing it in these patients, it's non-invasive. It feels really warm. It's really nice. And we can follow along with some, garlic willow drop in the ears, and that really helps avoid any antibiotics for these patients. for my GI patients, I've used it for patients that have diverticulosis and have an active, kind of flare up. And I had a patient who didn't believe me, and it was great. I love when people are just as experimental as I am, because he came into my office and he said, "Hey, you see my daughter and she trusts you, and so I'm going to give you a go, but I'm just going to tell you I'm having this active kind of flare up. Do you think the cold laser can help me?" And I'm like, "Hey man, I've never treated it for that, but let's give it a go." And so on the second treatment, I said, "Hey, how are you feeling?" He was like, "Well, I'm feeling better." And I was like, "Well, how are your antibiotics? Like, are they upsetting your stomach?" And he goes, "Doc, I didn't tell you this the first time, but I didn't believe that the cold laser would work. So I actually did not take my antibiotics because I wanted to see if this worked, if it was directly from the cold laser or if it was from the antibiotics that were just making things better." So I was like, "You sneaky little man, that was awesome." So I loved it because he was experimenting, and as much as I love to be, a scientist, and he was his own little scientist, and that was great. And I said, "Well, how are you feeling?" He was like, "I'm just going to tell you I'm 50% better." And I said, "That's amazing. Are you sold?" And he was like, "Not quite sold just yet. We'll do this treatment and we'll see how things go." But yeah, we cleared up his flare up in 4 treatments, and honestly, he hasn't been back for treatment because he hasn't had to. So it's That's really cool to utilize this for a lot of different things. And because it's so non-invasive, it's just really, awesome. And I have a specific setting for edema and congestion. So when I have patients who have, let's just say like an ankle sprain or anything that's swollen, I can use that to help clear out some of the swelling. But also for the congestion, I can use it over the lung fields for anyone who has upper respiratory infections, because that helps clear out the congestion in the lungs. And it's safe to use over the heart, the lungs, any organs. It's safe to use over metal implants. It's just amazing tech. Wow. I don't think I could practice without it. It's just invaluable. I really feel like everybody should have a cold laser at their house. And, bathe in cold laser light every night, and we would be better off, right?
Now, does that have any effect on, I know that a lot of the electromagnetic soup that we're all in all the time tends to make our red blood cells clump together and thus, cut down on our oxygen supply. Have you found that these lasers have any effect on that?
I haven't really looked into specifically that. That would be a really cool experiment to see how oxygenation in the patient changes to this particular light therapy. I mean, I know that there are other lasers out there that are more surgical lasers that they can actually go into the vessels, and any of these red blood cells that are kind of clumped up in these clots, that they can go in and bust them up, which is really awesome. So I really think we're on the cutting edge of what we can really do with light therapy. I think we're just testing the waters, honestly. I think the sky's the limit. So yeah, I would be interested to see how that changes the oxygenation. I would be willing to bet that it definitely goes up just based off the sheer physics and how it impacts the body.
Yeah, makes sense. From what you've said, I would agree that probably would be another positive side effect.
Yeah, for sure. Which is great nowadays because, with everything going around with COVID, everyone's worried about oxygenation and, a lot of upper respiratory stuff. So, that's a really good place for people to start and making sure that, they're healthy there.
Speaking of COVID.
Oh, gosh, here we go.
Here we go.
I opened it up, didn't I? Pandora's box.
You opened the Pandora's box here. So I have to ask you, where do you stand on germ theory?
Oh, my gosh. I mean, honestly, from my intro, I'm sure you understand that I'm a big fan of microbes and eating dirt, I guess. So I really have a problem, and I've had a problem with this for a long time, with all of this sanitation. And I really am predicting that we're going to have a problem in the near future with a lot of resistant microbes because we are so crazy right now with the sanitation.
And a lot of the sanitation is harmful, in and of itself, right? All these hand sanitizers, and these are chemicals that we're putting on our skin and being absorbed into our bodies. Correct. If we're utilizing them, that are, who knows what kind of side effects that's going to have from constantly doing that.
Correct. And it's funny because one of my patients in the office is a nurse, and she's like, when I first was in nursing school, they told me, don't use hand sanitizer all the time, wash your hands, because the hand sanitizer is going to kill off the bad and the commensal good bacteria that you need on your skin. So make sure you're washing your hands. So when they're telling nurses to wash their hand, but then the media is telling the general population to sanitize and Clorox wipe and bleach everything, we're really doing the uninformed public a disservice, because we're telling them to over-sanitize their environments, and we really need good commensal bacteria. If you think about it, that's how we actually started. We came through the vaginal canal with bacteria present and got it all over our skin and up our nose and in our mouth. And that's how we really were initiated into our external environment. And that was important. That was important for us to have diversity and to be able to recognize friend from foe. And so when we're now putting people in bubbles and telling them to over-sanitize, I think it's going to become very problematic for a lot of patients.
I agree. And there's one other thing that I want to bring up here that I recently read, and I'm going to read it here, and I think people will find it very interesting and enlightening, and I want to get your opinion on it too. Yeah. In 2008, Dr. Anthony Fauci, I call him the mini Nazi, co-authored a paper about the Spanish flu epidemic that rates as the most devastating modern pandemic. It swept the entire planet in the wake of the First World War and caused millions of deaths. So in studying this major and actual pandemic, what did Dr. Fauci and his colleagues find? Well, they discovered that most of the victims of the Spanish flu didn't die from the Spanish flu. They died from bacterial pneumonia. And the bacterial pneumonia was caused by wearing masks.
Oh, my goodness.
So the intention then, as now, was to halt the spread of, so-called virus, which has never been isolated, by the way. Even the CDC admits that they've never isolated the COVID virus, and, that's ridiculous in and of itself. But the idea was to halt the spread of wearing a mask, and there are many studies which show that masks are the typical masks that people wear do not, if there is a virus flying around out there, anxiously awaiting to infect us, it goes right through the holes in the mask. So, yes. But what actually happened was an unobserved pandemic of bacterial pneumonia, and that was created as a result of the mask wearing. And we've seen, I'm sure you've seen it on social media, pictures of people who have gotten staph infections and other bacterial infections on their faces from their masks. So, there's, we don't need to get into the politics of this, but there's way more to this than people are understanding. So I want to put that out there for people to think about what's really happening here. And then when they talk about a second wave, watch out for the second wave this winter. Well, in my estimation, that second wave is going to occur as a result of all these people, creating the bacteria in these masks that are going to, possibly cause these pneumonias.
Oh my gosh, I think you're really on it. One, I'm going to touch on the isolation part of things. So when I was in research at UF, we utilized PCR technology, which is what we're using now to do the testing. So that nasal swab is a PCR test. And PCR testing is used in research a lot. And the reason why we used it was to make sure that we could look at the genes of the DNA sequence. So we were looking at DNA sequences and finding the genes to see if they were upregulated as a result of our therapy, right?
Right.
So, but we're taking an RNA virus, and we're using it for a DNA-specific test, right? So when that came out, I was like, how does that make any sense? Why would we test an RNA virus on a DNA system? It doesn't. You have to have the right markers in order to make the RNA virus into a DNA, and then the test can actually do what it needs to do. But we have to make it into a double-stranded in order for that to work. So the whole system has been kind of flawed in the testing. I've been very vocal about my opinions on the testing, with my patients. And I'm just not a big fan of what has become very politicized and how government has become involved in medicine. And really, that's the problem, is not allowing the doctor-patient relationship to occur and having this big government dictate what is and is not correct. And unfortunately with Fauci, I've read multiple things where he said, one thing in the past, and now because it's COVID, it's completely different, which doesn't make any sense if you understand viruses and any bit of virology. And so what you're saying with masks, I see patients that have come in with impetigo infections now that that's from wearing masks. I have patients that come in with more anxiety. One of the things that I wanted to hit on with masks is I refused to put a mask on my kid. My kid's 14. I refused to put a mask on him. And the reason why is because I don't want him to be fearful. The fear is the worst part of this whole thing, I think, that people aren't addressing. Yep. And the fear part is going to increase your cortisol levels. And cortisol is a stress hormone. So that's going to suppress our immune system. So
you betcha.
We're making things a mess by being fearful, right? And so I never wanted my kid to be fearful. I never wanted him to be afraid of hanging out with his friends and giving people hugs and, giving me a kiss or anybody else, So I never put a mask on him, and I never will. The other thing, too, is that it really upsets me that young kids are being forced to put in masks.
Oh, I know. I can't stand to see that.
Oh my gosh. Here's the thing that really I don't think people are keying in on is I heard a person, they were speaking the other day about when we really recognize ourselves in the mirror, right? Mm-hmm. Do you know what age that is? It's at age 2.
2.
So at 2 years old, we really can look in the mirror and kind of recognize ourselves as kind of being this own little entity and things like that. What age are they recommending that people wear a mask? Ages 2 and up. Oh. So imagine a 2-year-old who's just recognizing that they're a unique being in this world, and now you're covering their face. I just think it's really detrimental for people. We're seeing, suicide rates go up. We're seeing alcoholism go up. It's just a lot that we're not looking at the psychological impacts, I think, that masking people is doing, and this whole fear-driven environment that we're in.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. And that is a huge problem. And these poor kids are basically being told, whether directly or subconsciously, that they are infectious carriers, or they could be, die and be infected at any moment. And it's a terrible, stressful thing to put children through, or put anybody through, that they have to go through their life, with all this deep fear. And, this is a psychological game, in my opinion, that's going on right now. And human beings as a whole, the human family is going to have to wake the hell up, or, this could definitely devolve into a lot of other areas that are even worse. And if you look at the Chinese system, where they have, total monitoring of everybody's, what they have to say, what their attitudes are. And, you have a social credit score. And if your score goes too low, you can't travel, you can't get certain jobs. I mean, there are all kinds of things like that. That's where all this leads to. If you want to talk about contact tracing and all that, that's just one step away from the whole social credit score.
Yeah.
And this is, this goes back, if any of our listeners have gone and done research on technocracy and that kind of thing, you realize that for over 100 years there have been a large group of people who have tried to implement this and are now finding fruition of their work, manipulating people using technology and psychological manipulation, propaganda through social media. And of course, we've talked many times on the show about social media and its roots in DARPA and the military funding for all these platforms, because they are data collection tools. But anyway, I don't want to get too far afield on the political aspect, although I think it's very, very fundamental to what we're seeing right now. But let's touch on, more on the spiritual side with meditation and yoga. Is that's something that you also utilize, right?
Absolutely. So, we definitely have the mind-body connection. And so it's really important to not only balance the internal biochemistry, but also to make sure that that spiritual side, whatever form of spirituality is great for you, that's awesome. I just think that you need to make sure that you're really connecting to source, because you have to have that in order to manage that stress. And especially in, these trying times right now and this fear state, stress is super high. And so I make sure that I utilize some stress management techniques with patients and ask them, how are you managing things? I will make sure that I give them some good options for sound therapy. So I utilize 528 hertz and 432 hertz. Those are my two favorite, to let people just kind of relax. Like, hey, play this in the background. If you're not able to sleep, play this in the background on loop, and it will, help you sleep and help you focus. So meditation is really important. I know you spoke with Susan Davis, who's amazing. Yep. And I utilize her in my office too. I refer patients out and say, hey, she's amazing for stress management. And, she can help you with anything in that spirituality realm too, if you, want. And it's nice to have a good team to be able to bring everybody together, because we really have to have that mind-body connection.
Absolutely. And, it's, as you said before, everything works together. The human body is amazing, the most amazing technology that we could ever have. And, we're always finding new ways that this technology of our bodies and our minds and our souls work together, and there's nothing that we can create in the way of a computer that even comes close to it, although a lot of people are trying to do that. Anyway, we're coming up against a break once again, and I do want to thank, since you brought up Susan, I do want to thank Susan Davis for recommending you to the show, and she's awesome, and we appreciate her as well. So you're listening to Inside the Matrix. We're going to take another short pause with our special guest, Dr. Adriane Hines. We'll be right back. Stick around. All right, welcome back, everybody, to Inside the Matrix with our special guest, Dr. Adriane Hines. Dr. Hines, there is another area that I was wanting to ask your opinion on, and that is water, because, we know, generally speaking, most of our water supplies, unless you're on a natural well somewhere that's not polluted, which is rare these days.
Good luck.
Most municipal water supplies are fluoridated. They're loaded with all kinds of toxic chemicals and pharmaceuticals that have found their way back into the water supply as well. So what kind of water do you recommend to your patients?
So you're absolutely correct. We are really bombarded with our one really important nutrient source, which is water. We need half our body weight every day in ounces of water. And if it's the wrong kind and we're adding more toxins in, then we're making the system worse, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I ask my patients is, where are your water sources? Are you on well water or municipal sources? Do you buy bottled water? What are you using? And it's not just the water that you're drinking. It's also the water that you're showering in. It's the water you're cooking with, because that's really important. And people don't understand that has an impact on health as well. If you're showering with horrible Bath and Body Works products, sorry, Bath and Body Works. If you're showering with toxin-laden, chemicals and, toxic water, then you could have the cleanest diet in the world and be drinking wonderful, pristine water, but it's still getting those toxins in through the skin. So that's really important. You have to work with where patients are and minimize their toxic exposure to whatever they can be, as far as financially and where they kind of are. So it's going to range in my office. One of the things that I tell patients is really simple and easy is, for your drinking water, take your normal Brita that you have And instead of using the Brita filter, buy bamboo charcoal. And most people have never heard of bamboo charcoal, but it's really fabulous in that, the bamboo has been incinerated, so it's in a charcoal form. And this charcoal is really mineral rich. And charcoal is a natural absorber of our fluoride and chlorine and things like that, right? So you can put this bamboo charcoal in your water Brita container. You can put it in your actual water cup, and depending on the size of the charcoal. And this briquette will not only remineralize your water and give you good, magnesium and the other minerals, but it will get rid of the nasty toxins that are in your water. Unfortunately, this does not get rid of, your pharmaceutical agents that do end up in the water. And I forgot, I think the one that's the most common is an anti-anxiety, like Prozac or something. It's like the most common and so you would think that our society would be less stressed with, the amount of Prozac that's in our water, but I don't know. So that's one option. The other are, home filtration systems, which, I definitely recommend having a home filtration system because then you don't have to worry about it. Right. And those, just making sure if you're getting a reverse osmosis, an RO machine, then you might want to add more minerals back in because it's going to deplete everything, really. It's going to really clean out a lot of the water, but it can deplete some of the minerals that you would naturally find in the water. So, you can add those back in either in a capsule or, when you're drinking the water, add those minerals to the water. So you can do systems like that. The other question that I get is should I drink regular water or should it be alkaline water? And my answer to that is we have to look at the pH of your system. If you're a very acidic person, then alkaline water is probably the best for you because we want to make sure that we're getting you to more of a neutral state as far as your pH of your blood and everything like that. So alkaline water can be very helpful for you. But if you're a patient that is very plant-based and has a really high alkaline diet, adding alkaline water can actually make the blood too alkaline, and that can be problematic. So it's really important to know where your levels are before you change anything dramatic with the pH. One of the other things that is super important is the mineral balance. Like we're talking about, magnesium is one of the most utilized minerals in our body and the underappreciated, I feel like, and most people are deficient. About 68% of the population is deficient in magnesium. So making sure that what we are doing with our water, we're not depleting too much of that either. And I really love Environmental Working Group. EWG.org is a really great resource I use for my patients because that will help them get really good resources on RO systems as well as other home filtration things, and they're amazing because they really look at the science and they really try to keep things less toxic. They also have a beauty guide where they have everything from makeup to beard products and baby products and everything in between to tell you what's toxic in your home and what's not, so that you can really buy products and be more educated, so that you're limiting the toxins that are coming in from your environment, because we really have so much toxins that are coming in from our environment, our food, our water supply. We're, like you said, we're just kind of being bombarded with toxins everywhere. So it's really important to know where these things are coming from so we can minimize our exposure to them.
Well, yeah, that sounds like a great resource. So that's EWG.org? Correct. Okay. Yeah,
and they will have a bunch of different consumer guides. They have one on mattresses. So, mattresses have flame retardants on them, which are horrible chemicals for us. And we sleep with our face in the mattress all the time, right?
Right.
And so we're breathing in all these horrible, flame retardant chemicals, and we're getting them all over our skin. And so they have mattress guides. They have beauty guides. They have one of my favorite resource is what they call the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. And what that is it is the 12, or the Dirty Dozen are the 12 worst pesticide-ridden fruits or vegetables. And at the top of the list every year is strawberries and spinach and kale, potatoes, all of these. So they will come out with a new list every year to tell you which foods are just laced with pesticides. And those are the ones that you absolutely want to buy organic because, I could tell patients, hey, make sure that you're eating, grass-fed meats and free range and organic. But if you're on a budget, which a lot of people are, that's a really hard thing to do. And so you have to be smart about this and meet people where they are. So I always tell patients, look, these are the 12 you absolutely want to buy organic because you want to make sure that you're limiting all of those pesticides. And then the clean 15 are the ones that are notoriously really low in pesticides. I'll tell you, when I go to the store, if avocados are on sale, I'm buying avocados. I'm not going to buy organic avocados because I'm not, utilizing the outer portion. They don't have a lot of pesticides in them. I know that I can be safe buying regular avocados versus an organic one as far as pesticides. So making better options or choices in the supermarket is really important for a lot of patients. So utilizing these guides are really helpful because a lot of people just don't know. And so we really have to educate them. And this website does a really good job in educating the public on, where the toxic chemicals are coming from in our environment and how we can avoid them.
Well, that makes so much sense because, back in the day, we had farmers local everywhere and people knew where their food came from and chances are they knew the farmer that grew it. But nowadays, we're very much isolated from the farmers in many ways and we don't know the source of our food supplies. And it makes a lot of sense to know those kinds of things, which ones are the worst as far as pesticides go. And it's really kind of sad to me to see that a lot of the corporate farms and these operations utilize glyphosate, which is basically Roundup from possibly the most evil corporation in the world, Monsanto, which is now Bayer, taken over by Bayer. So the chemicals that they use in Roundup. The glyphosate is the active ingredient, is highly toxic and disruptive to everything in our body pretty much. And we're all pretty much loaded with it because if you eat food that's not grown by yourself in your own organic garden or whatever, and you're going to get a dose of glyphosate. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is. But trying to minimize that amount always makes sense. And so to know, where your food comes from and know which fruits and vegetables are more prone to the spraying, which ones aren't. And, a lot of people are gluten intolerant, but they're actually really glyphosate intolerant because it didn't used to be that way until they started, soaking the seeds into this toxic chemical. So. Right. I mean, it's just crazy.
Agreed. Our whole farming system is really broken. Like I said, growing up, man, I went out to the chicken coop in the mornings to grab chicken or eggs for, breakfast. And I knew where my eggs were coming from. And we would, grow our own stuff. We knew what was in the soil. We knew to rotate the crops. And a lot of the things that you're finding now with these corporate farms is, like you mentioned, nutrient depleted soils because they're not rotating the crops properly. And it's all about, making massive amounts. And so you have to cut corners when you do things like that. And so patients utilizing, these small little farmers markets and getting to know their local farmers is really kind of an awesome, important thing. You're going to get more nutrient-rich foods from your local farmers, and you're going to know what they're utilizing for any kind of pesticides if they are, and that's really important. Knowing where your food is coming from, and even getting with some of your local farmers or ranchers if you're looking for your different cattle sources or other meat sources, because then. You really have a hand in what is going in your body. And that's so important because food is not just food, it's information. So the food we're taking in is going to send signals throughout our body. And whether those signals are good or bad depends on the food we're taking in. So really, food is so, so important. And I feel like it has been so neglected, and we've really steered away from this, cooking at home and being really conscious of the food that we're taking in to, being so rushed that we have to have things fast and quick and easy, and have kind of gone away from wholesome cooking and food.
Yep. Yeah. So much of what we have in our so-called modern world is taking us away from what is natural and what is important. And along those lines, I think about grounding and the idea of us being out in nature and getting out and getting some sun and being in nature as opposed to being in the concrete jungles that we normally find ourselves in.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That is so important. And I'm so glad you said that, because that is one of the things that will come up a lot with testing with patients. I'll run their vitamin D levels, and a lot of people are deficient. And I'm in Florida, and it's sunny here a lot of the time. And you would think people would be in normal ranges, but they're not. And it's because we spend so much time inside and we're avoiding the sun. And then we slather on toxic sunscreen to avoid getting sun exposure. And we're doing ourselves a disservice, because one of my favorite authors, Dr. Colin Champ, he wrote this book called Misguided Medicine. And one of the things that he kind of tackled was the notion of sunscreen, and how if we get sun exposure, we're going to be more likely to develop melanoma cancer. And that's not the case. The toxic stuff from the sunscreen is actually worse for us than it is to go out and be in the sun, because the sun is how we are naturally going to produce our vitamin D. So I always tell patients, make sure you're outside and expose your arms and legs at least, for 20 minutes a day between the hours of 10 and 2, because that is when the sun and the UV are the most robust to give us the most amount of vitamin D that we can produce, right? Now, your amount of sun exposure is obviously going to change the darker that your skin pigment is, because if we have darker pigment of the skin, then it's harder for the UV rays to get through the skin and get to the melanocytes that we need to produce our vitamin D, right? So obviously that's going to vary based on patient, but I always tell patients, get out, get into nature, get some sun. You really need it. It's really important for your immune system to have vitamin D. So having people locked down in their houses is really the worst thing they can do for their vitamin D levels and their immune system. So being out, maybe it's just my weird Oklahoma background, but I love being barefoot. So I'm constantly, walking. I live by the beach, so I'm constantly, walking on the sand and feeling the sand under my toes. And
oh, nice! I miss that.
Yeah, it's really amazing to just feel nature or feel the grass under my feet. I love walking through the grass. It's one of my simple pleasures. And just feeling those feelings and those simple, grass or sand under your feet is really amazing, and it really helps ground you to the earth. And it's this spiritual connection that I think we have gone away from a lot, unfortunately, because we become so busy and so industrialized. But it's so important to really get back to those simple things, because it just really helps overall with your mental well-being.
Absolutely. And, when you think about it, we are part of the earth, and we have that vibrational resonance with the earth, because the nutrients that created us and went into our parents, and it all comes from the earth and the sun. So everything we take in energy-wise, all the food that we take in, has been energized by the sun. And because of that, the sun is life. So if we avoid the sun and we never have sun, and especially when it starts getting cold, everybody just wants to stay indoors and stay warm, and that's understandable. But we still need to have that light. So, fortunately nowadays you can get light sources that you can use in your house to kind of help get you through the winter if you really can't go outside too much. Because, when it's 20 below, you're not going to actually take your shirt off and go outside and, wear that bikini outside and get some sun,
Right. Yeah. So, everybody doesn't live in sunny Florida. So yes, it does make things a little more difficult when you are in the northern part of the hemisphere. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still very important. I remember reading a book on grounding years ago, and I think the guy was from Alaska, if I remember correctly, and he started experimenting with it, and people had various illnesses, and especially seemed worse in the time of not much light and all that. And but I remember seeing a video of him where he would basically get down to his skivvies and get under his house and lay in the dirt where it didn't have snow on it. But he had all these amazing benefits from it, because there's energy that moves up through the earth. And if you're in contact with your skin, like you were saying, barefoot, or if your body's in contact with the actual earth, you're going to get a lot of those vibrations, those energies that are coming up through the earth. And it's very beneficial for for anybody, for animals. Animals get it all the time because their bare paws or whatever they have, or hooves or whatever, they're touching the ground. They're constantly in connection, that electrical connection with the earth. And we've sort of forgotten how important that is, and that it kind of goes along with the technocracy and the transhumanism that we see. People are sort of being herded into that direction, but we belong to the earth and the sun and the sky and all these natural things. And the more connected we are with that, it improves not only our physical health, but our mental health as well, our emotional well-being. All those things are improved.
Absolutely. I mean, one of my favorite things is to, for meditation purposes, is I love that I have the beach here, because that's really my Zen place. And so going out during times of either a new moon or a full moon and being on the beach and hearing the waves and, just sitting in the sand and feeling that energy is so revitalizing. So I encourage patients to do that more often. I'm so glad that you're, utilizing things like that, because it's really important for us to feel connected to this earth,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Just getting back to nature in general is important for us. We get locked up in our offices or wherever it is that we work, and we just get away from that, and we don't even really think about it. Anyway, I think it's highly important. There's just so much to our world that we ignore. The beauty of nature and the amazing awesomeness of going hiking somewhere, or going off into a mountain, or just out into the wilderness is just such an amazing thing. And like you said, it's very much a meditation. I know when I go hiking. Mount Charleston here is close to Las Vegas, and it's a beautiful place up there in the mountains, and it's only 45 minutes from here. But I love walking through the forest, and it's just a natural meditation, just being in that space. Yep. And it's a really, I think it's super healthy and beneficial.
Well, and it's a way of you connecting with the other creatures that we inhabitate the earth with, right? Mm-hmm. So you're connecting with not only the trees and nature and plants, but also the little creatures that are living in nature too. And you're emitting your own we have our own little magnetic resonance that we emit, but we are impacting other creatures and things that have their own frequency. So you're able to interact with other frequencies at the same time, which is really nice and healing to be able to, and just amazing to feel that oneness. And so I'm glad you have that escape. That's amazing.
And well, you bring up such a really good point. We're almost at the break here, but I do want to mention that, our quantum fields extend out quite a bit. So one of the detriments of this so-called social distancing is that we don't get in each other's energy fields as much as we used to. And, you have, if you're a good human being and you have good moral character and you have love in your heart and you go out and you are close to other people, they are going to absorb that energy from you, and you're going to have a very positive impact without saying a word or just smiling at somebody. You can't even see somebody smile now. They got a mask on. And these things are very disturbing to me and wrong.
Oh my gosh, yes.
As human beings, we have to just, really learn to stand up for ourselves and wake up to the fact that this is a manipulation. And with something that has a 99.9% survival rate, I mean, come on, what is this,
Yep.
And then one other point I have to make, I say it every week, and I'm going to say it again this week. The PCR tests were never meant to diagnose any disease, period. And Kerry Mullis, the guy who designed it, said the very thing. He said it's not meant to be something to diagnose disease. And what are they using it for?
Yep.
Diagnosing disease. And that's why, we supposedly have all these positives. Everybody should test positive or close to it if they've ever fought off anything with their immune system. Anyway, okay, enough of that rant. We're going to take a short pause right here. We'll be back in just a little bit on Inside the Matrix with our special guest, Dr. Adriane Hines. So stick around with us. All right, welcome back, everybody, to Inside the Matrix with our special guest, Dr. Adriane Hines. This is our final segment, so, time always flies. We always have a great time on the show. We get really into our subjects. But anyway, as we were talking about water earlier, I know that personally myself, I discovered a few years ago that I was really dehydrated, and I didn't know it. Most people don't know it when they're dehydrated. They get, you get headaches, kind of get lethargic a little bit. You can even raise your blood pressure because your blood starts getting thicker. Things like that happen. And I know that's what happened with me. My blood pressure was starting to go up, and I'm like, what the heck's going on? And I started, and I checked out a friend of mine and went to see her. And I said, hey, what do you think's going on? Because she is very much into holistic health and all that. And she goes, well, how much water are you drinking a day? And I said, well, I have some iced tea at lunch and I have coffee in the morning. She's like, yeah. So she said, you're completely dehydrated, And so I started drinking, maybe 3 quarts to a gallon a day. And oh my gosh, within a few days, what a difference. My energy level went up. So many good things happened as a result of just water, just drinking water. People don't understand, especially if you're in the desert, it's even worse because it's very dry here.
Yes.
And so we're losing a lot of just being outside, especially. We're losing water through our skin. And we have to constantly be hydrating ourselves. Otherwise, we get that. And also, I wanted to ask you about that relationship and also cardiovascular health and how that's affected.
Oh, goodness. Okay, so let's start with the dehydration. You're absolutely correct in that if we're dehydrated, it can have an impact on blood pressure and thus causing some headaches, because headaches can be a result of either, dilated or constricted blood vessels, right? So if we're having any problems with any blood flow into the head, it can definitely cause pain. But also, if we're dehydrated, we're going to be mineral deficient as well. And those minerals are what are responsible for maintaining that blood pressure. And minerals are really hydrating for the brain and for our muscles. So we can be dehydrated. And a lot of patients that come into my office that have problems with restless leg syndrome or pain into their legs, that's one of the first things I ask them is, how much water are you drinking? Because that is a huge indication. And headaches are another thing that can be changed. And you're right, it can be so quick in your recovery in how much better you feel by changing the amount of water. So I always tell patients the good rule of thumb is to drink at least half your body weight in ounces per day. You can drink more, but half is the minimum that you need to drink every day. And if you are doing more outside work, especially like you were saying in a dry climate, you're going to, kind of lose more water because it's going to go out into the drier environment, whereas someone who is in a very humid environment doesn't have to worry about losing as much necessarily. But anytime you're outside and you're sweating, you're losing water, so you need to make up for that by adding more into the system. So that's super important. As far as cardiovascular health goes, one of the things that I didn't mention was I'm actually a functional medicine doc for a nonprofit organization that focuses in peripheral artery disease. And what peripheral artery disease is when you have cardiovascular disease and you have some plaquing in your arteries. That's where we're developing this peripheral artery disease. So it's not just plaquing in the heart, but we're talking about the vessels into the legs. You're going to see patients that have problems with sores that don't heal on their legs. They're going to have problems with dilated vessels and in the lower extremities. They're going to have leg pain, difficulty walking, things like that in extreme cases. So my focus with this nonprofit organization is I'm able to go in and, analyze blood work. A lot of the time, these patients have problems with vitamins and mineral deficiencies. And again, we talked earlier about our food supply and how it's really not as nutrient dense as it used to be. And so we're finding a lot more people have problems with vitamins and mineral deficiencies just because they're just not getting an adequate amount from their diet. So we take an approach to look and see, micronutrient testing. Are there any specific micronutrients that are deficient? And if so, we need to make sure we bring this up to proper levels. And we consult about their diet. One of the things that I do with this organization is I take patients on virtual shopping sprees. It's been a little challenging with the current climate, but people can come with me FaceTime and I can take them around the shopping center and we can go through what, I'm preparing for dinner and how I'm picking and making choices in the grocery store. Because that's really kind of the hardest part for a lot of patients is knowing how to change their diet. So that's a really big focus in my office is transitioning patients over to a good, clean diet. Because when you don't grow up cooking in your household and you're used to eating out every meal, it's really hard to know how to cook and to know what to buy from this store. So we really have to reshape and educate patients a lot on what are our good food sources and food options and how do we make changes. I know you were talking about gluten sensitivity earlier. So knowing, okay, if a patient is gluten sensitive, then how are they going to make changes if they want to have some kind of pasta? Are we going to use, zucchini noodles instead or spaghetti squash instead of some noodles to be able to still have a pasta dish? So I'm able to work with patients like that. And again, doing advanced testing, one of the things that we kind of bang our heads against the wall with a lot of cardiologists is that they will run a standard lipid panel, and unfortunately running a standard lipid panel doesn't tell us the whole story about what's going on with cardiovascular disease. And there's 50% of the population that has a normal lipid panel can have a heart attack. And the first sign of cardiovascular disease most times is a heart attack. Like that's not a good sign because nobody wants to have a heart attack. But unfortunately, these patients are going through a regular PCP and finding that, the lipid look okay, no worries, and, move on. Or the lipids are not looking so good. I'm going to put you on a statin and move on. And unfortunately, statins make patients CoQ10 deficient. So that can cause more pain and complications if they're not adding CoQ10 in at high dosage. And with cardiovascular disease, if their cardiologists are not looking for advanced lipid testing, then they're really missing the boat because there can be more inflammation in the vessels. It could be coming from a genetic component. It could be coming from a reabsorption of the cholesterol in the GI tract that's causing their cardiovascular disease. So they're really not getting to the root of it. And again, that's where functional medicine kind of shines, is we can look at the root of what is causing this cardiovascular disease and address that to make a huge impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And your point about, if you have cardiovascular disease and you have a heart problem, it's not just in your heart. Again, it's systemic, it's holistic, it's something that's through your whole body. And, people tend to look at, he had plaque in his heart. No, if you got plaque in your heart, you have it everywhere, right?
Yep. And one of the things that we find is that A lot of these patients, the plaquing is going to form by either having high circulating blood sugar. So diabetes is another kind of comorbidity that goes along with cardiovascular disease. And the other thing is having methylation cycle dysfunction, which the methylation cycle is the second largest biochemical process in our bodies. And if we have more homocysteine, which is part of that cycle, that homocysteine can act as a really kind of nasty molecule and can nick our arteries. And our body's really amazing in that it's a self-healing organism. So if we have a nick in our arteries, we want to repair it. But what do we use to repair it? We use cholesterol because it's a lipid layer in our arteries. And so to repair the lipids, we add more lipids. And so if it's an ideal situation and you have just a small little nick, then the body can repair itself and you'll be fine. But if it's a nick and you have inflammation that goes along with it, then we're more prone to having plaquing. And then if the inflammation continues, then it makes the plaquing even worse and it just creates a systemic problem. So you're right, cardiovascular disease is not just heart. It is much, much more. And then thinking about the fact if we do have any altered blood flow to either the lower extremities or to even to the brain, we're just going to have less oxygen, less nutrients, and so those organs can't function very well. And that's the reason why these poor patients will have problems with legs that have sores that don't heal. They can have necrosis, which is the tissue dying. They're more prone to amputation, and it's just because nobody addressed the root problem.
So what have you found that is effective for cardiovascular problems?
So we have a lot of things in my toolkit, which for cardiovascular disease, which is awesome. The hugest one is diet. We really have to make sure that patients are eating a clean diet. I always tell patients I really like a paleo anti-inflammatory diet that's very veggie forward, meaning the majority of your diet should be non-starchy vegetables, and then you should have some good clean sources of proteins and fats. Minimize your sugars and minimize your grains as well. And I recommend that a lot of patients be gluten-free just because gluten can lead to more leaky gut because it activates that zonulin protein in our GI tract. So I definitely recommend more gluten-free, dairy-free options for patients. As far as supplementation go, there's a lot of supplements that I use. For my patients, I have a link on my website that my patients use for supplements because those are ones that I personally trust or have utilized. And that's where my patients will find their supplementation. But as far as, options, niacin is really kind of one of our heavy hitters when it comes to cardiovascular disease. That one works amazing. Same with alpha lipoic acid and L-carnitine. Those work really well for the heart. We can utilize things like phytosterols, which are plant sterols. And these plant sterols will really help with our cholesterol reabsorption in our GI tract. Also, we can, make sure we're balancing the microbes in the GI, because if we do have problems with the GI tract, I have so many patients in my office that come in with constipation. If you're not moving your bowels a couple times a day, normally the rule of thumb is the number of meals in is the number of exits. And if that's not the case, then you have constipation. And if you have constipation, then toxins aren't getting cleared out and things aren't moving through the system and being absorbed properly. So we address that as well because I find a lot of patients have problems with, constipation in their GI. So those are kind of pretty big ones. What else? B vitamins are super important, utilizing those and making sure that they're the right form of B vitamins. Methylated B vitamins are going to be better than, just your standard folic acid or cyanocobalamin, just because they're more biologically available. We don't have to break them down to utilize them in the body. And I utilize things in different forms, whether they be a capsule or a liposomal or a sublingual, and a sublingual is going to go under the tongue, so it just bypasses the GI tract, goes directly into the bloodstream. So those are really amazing for patients, especially for my GI patients that have problems. One of the things that most people don't realize, because we're so used to our society having a glass of wine or a drink in the evening, if we have any alcohol, we're actually going to inhibit our B12 absorption for 24 hours. So if you are, having a drink every night, but you're taking your B vitamins, you're wasting money because your B vitamins aren't able to be absorbed because you're inhibiting your intrinsic factor. So for those patients, I have to go to a sublingual because if they're going to still have their, drink at the end of the night, then in order to get their B vitamin status where I need it to be, we have to go to alternate routes, either sublingual or IV. So we can utilize those. Yeah.
What about probiotics?
So probiotics are really interesting. There's a lot of interesting research out there that I don't know that they've really found one that can actually colonate. Like it comes in, in the capsule, it goes into the small intestines and then says, boom, I'm here, I'm taking over. I don't know that they've really I don't know that they've confirmed anything like that.
Whether they set up shop.
Right. Well, because I always tell patients, like, your GI tract is like a street. And so if you find this like street in this neighborhood that you want to have a house, but all the lots already have houses on them, you can't build your dream house because all the lots are taken. So you have to, demolish a house on the lot that you want in order to build your dream house, right? It's the same with our GI tract. There's these microbes that are adhering to the lining of our GI tract. And so we have to sometimes make space for some new ones to come in. And the cool thing is our GI tract, it's really dynamic in that it can change based off of, our food sources, based off of nutrients and supplements we're taking. But as far as probiotics, I absolutely love a company called Claire Labs, and I'm not affiliated with them by any way, so I can say that without having, any issues there. So so I love Claire Labs. It's Claire with a K. They make really the best probiotics out there. I've had so many good just patients with utilizing this. Just so many good results.
How do you spell that?
Klaire.
Okay. Claire Labs, right?
Claire Labs. So they make really some of the best probiotics out there on the market. I use their probiotics for my little kids because if I have a baby that's born cesarean, they don't go through the vaginal canal and get the normal bacteria. So they are going to have bacteria that's similar to mom's skin versus mom's vaginal canal, and because they just don't have the same secretions, right? So their bacterial flora is going to be different. So in order to prevent colic, in order to prevent any problems with acid reflux or any kind of reflux with babies, we need to make sure they have a good probiotic that has certain strains in them. So Claire Labs is great. I use that with my cesarean babies. They have different strains that are really good for cardiovascular health. They have ones that are have been shown in the literature to really help with metabolic function. So if I have a patient that has problems with hormone balance or with weight issues, I can put them on this one, and those strains really help that. But the way that these probiotics work is even if they are not colonizing, they are making an impact on the other bacteria in the GI tract. So you can use a probiotic, and even if it doesn't colonize in the actual tract, it's going to impact the other bacteria in the tract. It's going to impact the inflammation in the GI tract as well.
All right, we've got a question from the chat that I want to pose to you. So Douglas is asking, have you had any advice for someone with emphysema? Would the cold laser treatment help with oxygenation? And he says, I'm on 2 LR daily. I'm not sure what that means, 2 LR daily, and can't get much exercise because of this. Okay.
So I personally have not treated a patient with emphysema with a cold laser. I would say that with emphysema, one of the things is that they have a problem with the alveolar in the lungs themselves. So My clinical assumption, and I say assumption because obviously I don't have experience with treating emphysema in my office, but my clinical assumption would be yes. I think it's going to help with the functionality of the lungs itself. I think it's going to make sure that we're not getting too much fluid and kind of mucus in the lungs, and it's going to help open up the airways so they don't have a lot of constriction. And the the cold laser is going to be, the way you would need to use it is, the patient would be without their shirt, and you would just use the cold laser over the back, and that's the best way to get into the lung fields. They're closest to the back there, and you can get into those that way. I can get into the upper lobes of the lungs on the chest as well. But I think it's a great idea to try it. I unfortunately have not had anyone in practice to utilize it with, but I think it would be a great therapy to really help improve the functionality of the lungs for sure, and making sure that obviously if this hasn't been already advised, to make sure that if you are a smoker that we stop smoking, because that is super important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we only have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure that if people want to find you online, and where they can find you, your website. And also, I wanted to ask you, do you do online consultations with patients as well as in your office?
Absolutely. Okay, so as far as consultation goes, yes. So when I say telemedicine, all my functional medicine patients can utilize my services either in person or they can do telemedicine. And with telemedicine, we're able to meet via Zoom securely and go through everything that we would need to face to face. So it's almost similar to what it would be like in the office.
Next best thing.
Next best thing, exactly. Obviously not the same as being in person, but I promise I will make sure I smile a lot through the camera, and it will be the same as being in the office, right? So we can utilize that for patients. As far as if somebody wants to reach out to me, my website has all of my contact information on there, and that is simply Wellspring, WELLSPRING, naturalmed.com. So wellspringnaturalmed.com. And they're able to reach out to me. My email is there, my contact information. If they want to schedule an appointment, they're able to fill out information online, and we can get them into the office for either a physical consult or a telemed consult, and be able to utilize everything. And we go through the first appointment, and then report of findings can be done in the same manner as well.
Okay. Now, do you recommend that people have a blood test or something before they meet with you, so you have some results to go over, or do you do that in a follow-up?
So I don't recommend patients have blood work done prior to coming to see me, and the reason why is because during our conversation, you might say something that says, "Ooh, I want to test for this." So I really want to make sure I have a good history and a good first appointment, and then order labs. And, my patients, I'll order labs through either Quest or LabCorp, and I have others for my self-pay patients as well. And then we sit down for a second visit, and I go through the labs line by line with you, because I want to explain to my patients exactly what's going on with their biochemistry so that they know exactly what I know. I don't want them to ever leave my office going, "I just did what she told me." I want them to understand why I'm telling them this and how it correlates with their symptomatology and their blood chemistry.
And that makes so much sense, because then you can get their brain working with their body as well when they understand what you're trying to accomplish, right?
Yes, because it's a team effort.
Yes. Makes a lot of sense. Dr. Hines, thank you so much for talking with us today and sharing your knowledge with our listeners. We really appreciate it, and we're so happy to know that there are doctors like you out in the world doing great things.
Oh, thanks, Jimmy. It's an absolute pleasure.
And thank you once again to Susan Davis for connecting us. And until next week, everybody, please take care, do the best you can, be kind, be loving, and we'll see you inside the Matrix.
This is Inside the Matrix, hosted by Jimmy Brent.
Who are we talking about?
Jimmy Brent. Live every Sunday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
It is worldwide.
Broadcasting from an undisclosed location deep within the neon capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. For more information on the host and the show, please visit InsideTheMatrix.org. That's InsideTheMatrix.org. It's time to break the chains of manipulated consciousness and claim our true nature as creative divine beings. Inside the Matrix. Inside the Matrix.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.